Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company, episode 150. And we're here to preview the Harris Chain of Lakes for the final stop of the St. Croix Rods Bassmaster Opens and the EQ points race for 2023. I'm your host as usual, Ronnie Moore, my guy, my co-host, like always, Jessie joining me. And Kyle, the open season's almost done, which means we have very few tournaments left in the season. We always have the last few opens extend into the fall a little bit. We keep an eye on who's qualifying for the Classic, who's qualifying for the Elites. And then we'll have like the college bracket around this time, the team championship, the nation championship, and we're all done for the year, especially once the Redfish Cup is here and gone. So we've already knocked the college bracket out of the way. We've got the Harris Chain Open coming up. We've got the nation championship and the team all within the next few weeks. And even kayak is wrapping up as we speak. And so the season's coming down to a wire and every one of our races is getting solidified.
Yeah, no, I think we've talked about it already a few weeks ago, but the amount of times between the end of the last Elite Series tournament to now that I've been asked, what do we do during the off season? I'm like, brother, there is no off season. There is no off season. Like we get our off season in all reality is like half of a month.
Yes.
It's kind of like the maybe like week before Christmas and like the week of like between Christmas and New Year's. And then after that, it's like right back to it. There's almost no break on the back end and there's no break on the front end. Obviously the Elite Series has been over for a while, but like you said, I mean, since then we've had two opens, the bracket, kayak tournaments. I mean, there has been a tournament every week for the last, I don't know how many weeks, like 7-8 weeks probably. So definitely rewarding to get to this time of the year when things start dwindling down, but also super exciting because like you said, we're going to figure out who the new elites for next year are going to be, obviously through the EQs. Still have the nation coming up. Definitely some spots in the Classic available. Definitely a lot to be determined here, even though we're close to the end of the season.
Yeah, basically our off season consists of, and this isn't a complaint, we've got a turkey leg in one hand and we're opening presents in the other, and then we already have our pants halfway on to go back to the office, but it's because it's time to preview the next season and get ready all the elements and the plans necessary for the fishing season. But I am super excited. We had a meeting this week or last week from when this podcast will air. We had a meeting last week at JM where we kind of laid out some of the conversations that happened at the end of the year on what we're expecting for next year, the things we're trying to incorporate into Bassmaster Live, and just try to get better than we were last year. You've been a part of some of those conversations and meetings when you were here with Live, and that's one thing I always appreciate is we could come off our best season ever in terms of what we've done, what we've seen, how the views have gone, but no one in the office ever settles on what we've done. They're always trying to make it better than next year and figure out ways to be better. So that's always a hopeful thing. Now let's think about the last two opens and the college bracket. We talked about Tyler Williams winning at Watts Bar when we previewed the Ozarks with Casey Scanlon. Congratulations to Tyler Williams on knocking that out. Then we get to the Ozarks. Kyle Patrick wins, and we had so many of similar guys in the top 10 at Watts Bar that we saw at the Ozarks. Some of these guys are having a phenomenal season. It's almost like you don't want to talk about it because you don't want it to go downhill for the next event. But like if all these guys get a top 10 at the Harris Chain, it's kind of like good way to button up the season. You've had a remarkable year. Just don't end with 100th, even if you're safe for the elites. We don't want that triple digit like nastiness on the screen. We want to keep everything in the top 40 for the most part all year and be done with it there. So absolutely fun couple weeks. Easton Fothergill wins the college classic bracket after having brain surgery and being team of the year, and it's absolutely phenomenal to see that transpire and the stories that played out there. And now, Kyle, we're here for the Harris Chain of Lakes Open. We've been to the Harris Chain plenty of times. Most of the time we're in the Harris Chain in the January, February, March region of the year, whether it's an open, a college event, or a Bassmaster Elite Series event. But we have had a fall Harris Chain event, and we normally have like a early winter one. Like in November, December, we've had the team championship fish off here before, but in the fall, we've had a college event, 3 days. It had 80-something pounds, set the record for a 3-day college event. And I'm excited for the Opens anglers to tackle it this coming week.
Yeah, no question. It'll be interesting to discuss that and dive deeper into it. But when we think of October, here where we're at in Alabama and Arkansas, you think like fall fishing, still tough. The fish are transitioning. The fish in Florida are doing something completely different, and they're ready to eat and they're ready to feed. And I was there for that college championship, a few years back. I want to say a couple years back, but it was
I think
several
it's
years back now, which makes
2020, maybe.
yeah, it was indeed. I was wearing a mask, so I know it had to have been 2020. But it was crazy. Like, obviously the top end weights with Connor tomorrow and Cole Sands were just insane. But the amount of guys, we just covered just in a general area that were just catching bags. I mean, 15 plus pounds with ease. It just seemed way too easy. Like, to me, I assumed we were going to go down there, and me personally at that time having no prior knowledge of the Harris chain in the fall, I was like, well, we're going to go down here, and I'm guessing it's going to be hot, and I bet it sucks. Like, I bet both of those things are true. And it was hot, but the fishing was also hot. They were catching big bags, doing a variety of different things. Some of the same things we see, obviously, in early season tournaments. So much vegetation, so much stuff to fish. Some of that stuff plays literally all year long, so you can't get away from that. But obviously, the offshore bite can be good. There is a lot to be done at the Harris chain, and you get the prospects of the fishing being really good, with addition to the amount of storylines and the guys that need to catch them and the guys that this is their last chance. I mean, there is a lot to like about this final tournament. There's no doubt.
And we're going to have, there's always Elite Series pros in some of these events, but especially when you think about Division One, which is AKA the old Southern Opens, when you have Eufaula, Wheeler, and Harris Chain on there, you're going to have those guys. So you're going to have guys like Brian New and guys like Brandon Lester, who are normally phenomenal in Opens, also trying to punch a classic berth after struggling at the end of the beginning of the Elite season this past year. Let's look at the points race real quick before we invite our guest on. They're in the waiting room of this, but JT Tompkins, John Garrett, Trey McKinney, Robert G, Kenta Kamira, but he's already on the Elite, so we skip him. Kyle Patrick, Logan Parks, Kyle Austin, Tyler Williams, and Jamie Bruce. That's your top 10 and the 9 anglers who will qualify for the Elite Series. I would go ahead and say JT Tompkins at 1480, John Garrett at 1461. They are already above what the projected point total would be. Trey McKinney is just a few points below that, but I'll automatically say I believe he's guaranteed in. I'll even say Robert G at 1372 with a 101 point lead or 111 point lead over 10th right now. I would say that Robert G is also in, but the movement there is from 6th to about 17th. You have 6th where Kyle Patrick is 1,304 points. Ben Milliken's down at 1,232. About 72 points between 6th and 17th. So 72 points for about 10 or 11 anglers. I'd expect the bottom half of that AOY race to flip-flop and switch out of there. Jamie Bruce, obviously, 1 point inside the cut line. Right below that, though, Wesley Gore, Sam George, Logan Johnson, Joey Nania, Bobby Lane, Jacob Bigelow, and Ben Milliken. I would say that there's another 11 points to Brett Cannon in 18th. So I think that that's just too far. 80-something points, maybe too far back. 70 points may still give you a shot. If you get a top 5, there's a possibility that chaos could happen and you could make it into the Elite Series. You have to expect some of these guys are Northerners. They've had great years, and I'm not wishing this on anyone. The same thing had happened for Southerners. With Florida, it's hit or miss for guys. It's hard to have a good track record in Florida. So some of these guys who have had really good success the last few events since, the St. Lawrence River, then we had the 2 fall events. I would, somebody's going to slip up that's 6th through 10th and have their worst finish of the year possibly, and it'll open the door. So we'll keep an eye on that. When it comes to some of the big names, we've kept our eye on this guy all year long. We said that he was going to be close to qualifying if he could just do a couple good events. He got really close after Watts Bar and fell back a few spots, but not really many points. He's still about 20 or 30 points behind, and that is Bobby Lane. He is our guest today on the podcast, sitting in 15th place in points, and I'm excited to have him on the podcast today. Kyle, have you been surprised with how Bobby's done? He's done well, but he hasn't had top 10s until we got to Watts Bar.
I think that the main thing is, and I'm anxious to get his take on this as well, is the fact that, Bobby Lane is one of the best bass fishermen of all time and has done that over the course of his career, been one of the top guys and has not just been a shoe-in, obviously. And I think that speaks to the depth and the quality of anglers in the EQs. And I certainly think he would obviously agree, but certainly in a good position here in the last event, obviously going to his home state of Florida. But I think that would be the one thing that would surprise me the most is that, you see Bobby Lane, fishing all the EQs, and you just almost automatically assume he's going to take one of the 9 spots. But so far, up until this point, it's not been like that. But it doesn't matter what's happened before. It matters after the season is complete. So we shall see.
He is charging. We've got a couple guys who have won events just outside of the qualification trying to get in there. Got some guys running the baby pattern like Sam George as well that are trying to sneak in there at the end. And Bobby Lane, who was our guest today, previewing the Harris chain. I got to talk to Bobby for the first time in a long time when I got to interview him prior to his top 10 at Watts Bar. And Bobby, it was good to see you in the top 10 there, throwing top water, fishing grass, fishing shallow. It's always a pleasant surprise to see that these days. But these last couple events, they've offered great opportunity to move up, and that is exactly what you've done. You're just 20 or 30 points from qualifying for the Elite Series once again.
Yeah, man, it's been one of those years. I've actually fished pretty poorly this year, but to have a chance is all I could ask for, and to be on at least somewhat of a home body of water down here in the state of Florida, I'm pretty pumped up about that. So it's the lakes are looking good. The weights have been okay, 18, 19 pounds have been winning most tournaments around here. We got a big Florida Bass Nation event going on this weekend. My son will be in that with his partner. And of course, when he starts, we start practice. So I won't be allowed to talk to him at all. But the lakes are starting to get some grass back in them. The fishing's been pretty solid. And I expect it to be a great week and a great event.
Bobby, one thing we talked about, jumping right into the, pre-tournament coverage, I guess, is that October in Florida is not like October everywhere else in the country. You take where Ronnie and I are at in Alabama and Arkansas, October is typically really bad. It's kind of transitioning. It's still hot. Things are changing. But in October in Florida, like, how would you describe or set that up for somebody that's really not familiar?
Yeah, we typically don't start cooling off until after Halloween, which is the end of October. But believe it or not, we are going to have a little bit of a cold front come through the start of next week. And from what I saw up there at Lake County, we're talking a few nights in the high 50s and some days in the high 70s. And I mean, right now I'm at 85 degrees and there's really not wind at all, but it's comfortable. So I don't think there's a big transition yet, like you would see in other lakes, like, Missouri, Tennessee, where we've just come from. Those fish are already into that, transitioning mode from coming offshore or whatever they do to moving towards the backs. These fish really, they never do that, so to speak, right? They kind of hang around the same areas their whole life. They don't always just live shallow, but, they'll just migrate offshore. And what I love about the chain of lakes, man, is it's got shell bars, it's got brush piles. It's, like I said, the grass is starting to come back in all the lakes, and it just offers any kind of fishing you want to do. So even though that cold front's coming through, I don't think it's going to deter the bite at all. If anything, it might wake them up a little bit. Big bass has been running, 6.5 to 7.5 pounds. So, I'd like to see that bumped up a little bit to 8.5, 9.5. That's when you start really seeing these fish make that transition. But the good thing about Florida, when the weather does cool off, is it just seems like all the fish start biting, not the big ones, but it's just a fun day to be on the water. It's comfortable out, and there's a lot of fish to catch. If that's from 1.5 pounds to 2.5 pounds, it just like it gets those fish excited. So you're right, we don't see a big change, but I'm just going to step back on that a little and say we are expecting our first pretty good cool down during the event. And I think that's going to be welcoming for all Floridians for sure.
I was going to ask you about that. As someone who is, you wouldn't necessarily call yourself a local to there. Maybe obviously the Kissimmee chain would be more familiar and local to you, but plenty of experience at Harris chain, knowing about it, seeing it on a regular basis. That's like if Kyle fished Lake Hamilton all the time and then Lake Ouachita popped up in the tournament report, he would know, even if he hasn't fished there lately. So for you going into the practice period, this podcast is obviously going up almost towards the end of practice when you've already figured out things. But going into practice, there's 7 or 8 lakes in play. Some of the out of towners will launch right there at Venetian because that's the takeoff ramp. They need to get familiarized with it. Where we're taking off from, what the lakes have to offer. how do you balance your 4 or 5 days of practice to where you don't spread yourself too thin and you got fish in Apopka, fish in Griffin, fish in Dora, Eustis, and in Harris and Little Harris, where you want to go run here, run there? It's how do you balance that when you first look at the schedule and you look at the weather and where you want to go?
Yeah, you do have to keep all that in mind. That's a great question, Ronnie. And the one thing that the chain of lakes, Harris chain of lakes, has for sure is a lot of canals and a lot of idling. And like you said, if you want to go to Griffin, you have to either wait in a lock or hope you get to the lock first. If you decide to go to Apopka, not only is it 1, 2, 3, 4 idle zones you have to go through, then you have to go to a lock where they only let 3 boats in at a time, and it takes about 15 minutes. So I mean, even if your boat 9 and 9 boats go, you're waiting 45 minutes before you lock through. And to go to any lake, right, except for Lake Harris, in Little Lake Harris, you have to go through idle zones, the Dead River, the Door Canal, Haynes Creek and all that. I mean, they're long idles even to get over to Griffin to get to that lock. So um, you do have to keep all that in play. And the way I'm going to attack my practice is when I decide to go to a lake that day, whatever lake that might be, is put that time in on that lake. Make sure I cover everything I need to. Just don't, hey, Bobby, you love to flip, and stick to your flip and stick on that lake. Venture offshore, look for shell bars, use my electronics properly, look for new stuff. I do have a lot of knowledge on that lake, but I don't have a lot of knowledge when it comes to shell bars and stuff like that. So it's going to be key for me to get out there and spend my time doing that. And then, like you said, when the tournament rolls around after the 4.5 days of practice, where did I get the most bites, and how am I going to utilize my time the best? When did the fish bite the best? Where do I feel like I need to be on each lake at each given time? I don't see this event going down on one lake. I think a guy's going to have to make a lot of educated decisions as the week goes on and as the weather looks like we might have some weather coming in. I mean, you got to play the wind, the rain, all that comes into play, and it makes it challenging, but it makes it fun because I couldn't pick a lake that's going to win the event, but I surely will tell you that every lake is in play for sure, and a guy that can put the best decisions in those lakes, and catch the fish he needs to catch every single day, will turn out. And I think it's really going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of running around, a lot of idling in between stuff, and everybody's probably going to see everybody. There's really not too many hiding places down here. We've had the college bracket here before, and we've got a lot of high school. There's going to be 160, 70 high schoolers out there on Saturday and Sunday. So pretty much everybody's going to get a good idea of what's going on and where some of these fish are going to get caught in. And there's nothing illegal about watching some high schoolers catch some fish. I mean, I would never fish with them, but I would definitely root them on and hope that they win the event, and that wherever they are at, that they restack again.
Bobby, I always ask this question, and I always tread lightly because I don't want you to tell me necessarily the baits you're going to throw. But considering the tournament on Saturday will be on Bassmaster Live, kind of give your prediction for some of the baits, some of the things you think we'll see on Bassmaster Live come Saturday.
Yeah, man. I mean, it is Florida, and you really don't have to dig real deep in your tackle box to tackle Florida. It's more about finding the fish. Okay. There's going to be a slew of baits that work from swimming worms to 10-inch worms to, bottom hoppers to, the Chopo can work over submerged hydrilla. You're going to see spinner baits come into play. Baits like the slobber knocker. Of course, flipping's going to be huge. No matter what you want to flip, you could flip a general style bait, you can flip a creature bait, you can flip a jig. It doesn't really matter. You don't want to get too crazy on all your baits, but you want to have those baits lined up. I think those are going to be the winning baits. Even a rattling bait coming through a rattling vibe bait, some way, shape, or form, rattle trap style bait coming across that grass. You never know. You're going to have to predict the weather, but keep it simple like that. There's not going to be no spinning rods going in my boat on this one. I'm going to fish like a man the whole entire time. And it's really going to come down to the baits that I just told you about. Keep my colors simple, bone and black if I'm throwing top water. I got the new Berkeley Swamp Lord out. That could very well be a player up in some of that shallow stuff. Harris and frogs, they do get along. So, June bug, black and blue, green pumpkin, watermelon red, just stuff that works in Florida. And it's really, guys, it's about finding the fish and finding, I'm going to say you need 5 to 7, 8 spots. That if there's 3 or 4 boats on one, you can run to the next one. If there's 2 or 3 boats on it and they don't want to let you in, then you need to go to the next one. This is a lakes. These are lakes like Okeechobee. When Horse Island or South End is on fire, you will be fishing next to somebody. And can you outfish them, or do you want to try to find something a little out of the ordinary, but still have them in your background, kind of like we watched Champlain go down. All those boats were right in that one area, and what's his name ended up winning it just on the outside of them. So, the guys that run off and think they're going to find these great big secrets, it very well could happen, but for the most part, stick to where the fish have been for the last 10 years and try to figure out which baits they want the best.
Bobby, that's a perfect segue to my next scenario and situation. You talked about fishing right off the edge of a big group of people. Well, that's how Buddy Gross won it in the Elite Series event. You had a quarter of the field or half the top 50 fishing the only grass on the system, it seemed, offshore, and he was dabbling near it. He'd go and find some other stuff near it and was able to win that event. It surprised me because it was only about 77 pounds to win the event, lower than I thought by about 50%. I thought we were going to set records with how good the Harris chain was fishing and the spawn and the full moon, all those things. When we get to the fall, though, we saw those records the college kids did. They had 80 something pounds for 3 days and they won by over 20. I couldn't imagine catching 20 pounds a day in the fall in Florida and losing by 20 pounds, but that's what happened. So when you think about the way the grass laid out and the way the field will be dispersed, is the grass either coming back, or what was the deal with it last, the spring of 2022 with lack of eelgrass and hydrilla in certain lakes? Has it came back? Is there a report, or is it just local knowledge knowing that, hey, all these lakes have their own different lily pads, pencil reeds, hydrilla, eelgrass, all that stuff?
Yeah, that's Buddy Gross, he wanted on the outside of Banana Cove. That was kind of a shell bar where those fish were staging up and working their way into Banana Cove, and it was cool watching it go down that way. And you're right, the weights were a little bit down, and we saw some big fish, but we didn't see a lot of big weights. And I think what's gone on over time is just like what happens at any other lake, that the Harris chain of lakes used to be, and Eustis and all the lakes used to be just absolutely chock full of hydrilla. I mean, there was matted hydrilla in the middle of Harris for 4 or 5 years, up into 12, 15 foot of water. And it was some of the most beautiful stuff you'd ever seen. But of course, you get pleasure boaters and people that live on the lake, and they can't run their boats through that stuff. So, I mean, I get it. There needs to be a happy medium there with FWC and conservation. And I know that's a touchy subject, but realistically, this fall, I have not seen a lot of spraying. I was over there during the pre-practice, and there is a lot more grass growing. Banana Cove is almost a solid mat of hydrilla. A lot of these lakes are starting to get some eelgrass back. We're starting to see some peppergrass come back. We'll always have the Kissimmee grass, the lily pads, the buggy whips. Those don't really change because they're a lot more hardier and can handle some of the spraying. The canals look good. They're starting to get some grass out in front of those also. So, yes, there is a lot of vegetation in the lakes. I know Griffin is just loaded with hydrilla. The marsh is a solid mat, and I think duck season's fixing to crank up, and that ought to be some fun duck hunting in the marsh for sure. I know Dora's starting to produce some grass. View Claire has been a player for a while. I think that's where the college kids slammed them, and it's got several. Except me and Corey Johnson were talking about that when we were here for the Toyota Series earlier this year, how much grass is coming back. And Dora or View Claire was actually crystal clear. Now they've opened up in the locks recently in Apopka, and it's let that more dirtier water come into there. But we do have a lot of grass. It's going to expand the field a little bit, which is a good thing. But like you said, you don't want to venture off too far and get the problem is Apopka is a great lake to fish, and we've seen some great stringers come out of there in the past. But man, you You only give yourself 3 to 5 hours to fish at the most, depending on your check-in time. And depending on the weather, if you get caught on a fast trip and you don't catch them, you don't have a choice. You can't fish on the way back, right? Because you have to get through the lock, you have to go through all those idle zones, and you have to make your check-in time. So you would think you'd be able to go over there and then make it back and be like, oh, I'm going to hit this, and this on the way back, and you just don't have the time to do it. So the lakes are very, very healthy this year. The grass is coming back, and I think the reason we're not going to see those giant weights is, let's face it, when a lake like the Harris chain of lakes, all the lakes have produced so many big stringers over the years and years and years. They've eradicated a lot of the grass. Those fish kind of get more subject, easier to catch with electronics now in the high school and college, and everybody coming up through the ranks. Everybody wants to go to the best bass lakes in the country, and Harris chain is definitely on top of everybody's radar. And these guys get out there and pound them and pound them and pound them, and they just get smarter. And I think fishing pressure has definitely made a difference. But let's face it, this place is loaded with bass, and I still expect the weights to be really, really good across the board. Not a lot of bar where a 7 pound might get, going to be okay. So expect the weights to maybe not double, but I expect them to stay pretty close to the same, which is not common. Usually we see it drop 2 or 3 pounds, but if you can get yourself in the teens, somewhere between that 15 and 19, that's been a really, really good shot at a time now. And if you can crack anything in the, you're going to be standing there doing an interview with Craig Lamb and those guys at the end for sure.
Bobby, another aspect that you mentioned was having to come back from Apopka if they make that run and that you don't have time to fish anywhere else. There also may be, Florida's not necessarily known for this. People don't talk about it, but there should be plenty of pleasure boats and pontoons on a Saturday in the fall when the Gators are not playing too hot, that they're going to be choosing to go to the lake one last time, then go to the game in Gainesville. I had to throw that dig in there. I was a little shocked this past weekend.
Well, let's face it, if the Gators play like they did against Kentucky last week, I don't think anybody's going to care whether they're on the water or watching the TV. They're going to flip it over to another game. We need to get our act in gear again. We looked good against Tennessee. That was a pretty cool win, and I was actually in the top 10 at Watts Bar there when the Gators were going to play Tennessee that night. I was the only Floridian standing there, and about 200 Tennesseans waiting to chomp at me. So that was cool, and no hard feelings there. But I seriously doubt the pleasure boaters are going to be an issue. Where you see those most is trickling through the canals where you have to idle anyways. I mean, you're nothing like the Ozarks guys, the cigarette boats and the giant 50, 60 footers everywhere. I mean, it's amazing the more times I go to the Ozarks, how many more boats are actually there. We won't have that issue, especially they're projecting a little bit of weather coming through Wednesday and Thursday. The chances are going down every day. So, I mean, it's still a pretty far cry out to see what that's going to shape out to be. But, I seriously doubt we're going to have any issues with the pleasure boaters. I would love to see the Gators actually play good. But, I have a goal in mind, and that's to be in that top 10 on to Saturday. And long as we're there, that's the best we can do. You can't predict the future or what's going to happen. I know I got my foot on the gas, and mentally and physically I'm prepared and hungrier more than ever to take the next step. But I got a job that's in front of me, and it's not the easiest job, and I've got a lot of pressure on me. And trust me, I feel it. It's about my 4th podcast this week and 10th interview. So I love everything about it. I was born and bred to do this fishing stuff, and I eat it up. Me and my son here, I'll show you guys. We're coming back from the water this morning. There's Bobby Jr. I got my daughter Amberly sleeping, her friend Cammie. We all went to the chain of lakes this morning, and just staying fit, staying ready, guys. It's going to be a great week, and I'm excited to get up there.
Well, with all the sports talk, I got to ask, I was already thinking this. So we always talk about like keys to the game. You hear the announcers talk about that. for fishing, for this tournament, for you, like what is the key to success? Like, is it a lot of times you talk about Florida being one big bite, will carry your weight. For you personally, what do you feel like is if blank happens, I'm going to have success at this event?
Yeah, so definitely a big bite is key, whether that be a 6 or 7 pounder. But the problem is with this time of the year is you might only back that up with pound-and-a-half fish, and that's only going to get you, what is that, 4, 5, 6? That's going to get you 13 pounds, and you have to do it again the second day for that one big fish. Lake Harris is more about 3.5 to 4.5 pound fish this time of the year. Those aren't great big fish, but they're super quality, and that's what's going to get you into that 17, 18 pound, 19 pound range. If you can throw a 6 or 7 pounder in there, now you're up into that 20 pound class range. And they'll try to figure out where I got my biggest bite in practice. Well, let's hope to get some big bites in practice. But Florida has always fished one big fish carries you all the way. It's not going to do it next week going into the last open. You're going to need several quality fish to get you into that final day. You can't take 8 or 9 pounder and take that all the way to the end and expect that a 10 pound day is going to do it the next day. The Harris chain of lakes is so healthy, and it has so many quality 2.5, 2 to 2 3/4 pound fish in it that guys are going to find them. And now that all of a sudden puts you at that 13, 14 pound mark, which is going to be the more consistent mark across the board. So yes, finding the big fish, but finding a couple of those 3.5 to 4.5 pound bites are going to go a lot farther than one big fish with just a limit.
Bobby, this is kind of an interesting dynamic. Every time we get to a lake in the fall, and this reminds me of Sam Rayburn last year. A great body of water in the fall time. It can be tough, but it could also produce giant bags. And we see a guy catch 5 pounds, then 31 pounds, and then 7 pounds. But it's enough to get inside the elite qualification. When you come to a big bass factory like this, you're 15 points out currently in 15th place. Me and Kyle have been talking about it from 6th to 17th. Those 11 guys are within 70 points of each other. I think that any one of those guys, a mixture of those 11, could jump into the last 5 spots for qualification. Is there a different dynamic? These grinders have been positive for you, and for some of these other guys, it's not been the best situation for them. But for you, these slugfests like the St. Lawrence River and like this event, it could throw a wrench into some people's plans, because you could find yourself in 100th and actually like you caught decent weight. They just are catching them so good.
Yeah, dude, that's spot on. Like, right. You had a bad practice and you think 8, 9 pounds is going to be okay, or 10 pounds. And, hang on a minute. What does my son here have? Okay. Yeah, you could catch, 8, 9 pounds and be like, well, I'm going to be in okay shape. Like you think you were at Watts Bar, and you might be in 60th place. And I think if you catch 8, 9, 7 to 9 pounds is probably going to have you down in those 100 place finishes for sure. And then the next day you're going to swing for the fences, and the fences aren't there to swing for. And the wind blows out of a different direction, and you just ruin it. Now on the backside of things, a guy could very well catch 8 or 9 pounds one day and just go fishing the next day somewhere and bust a 21, 22, 3-pound bag. Now all of a sudden he's at 32, 33, and it hurt your feelings, because your consistent 14 pounds a day doesn't even get there. So yes, that's going to be all across the board. I think everybody's probably going to have a limit of fish. Well, at least you hope. That the lakes have been, this time of the year, they're fishing really good. It would be wonderful to see a 25, 30-pound bag. It is definitely doable. And Harris chain of lakes this time of the year is the place I would pick, if any. It wouldn't be an Okeechobee, a Kissimmee. It wouldn't be some of these other lakes. It would be Lake Harris, because of the massive amounts of shell, brush, and grass, and the size of the fish. But you're not going to do that in one spot. I don't think you're going to have to make that, roll up on one spot, maybe catch a 6-pounder on another one, catch a 7 or 8-pounder. Now all of a sudden you're like, guys, it's on. And I don't see that happening in some of these other lakes. But if it does, you could run to a Popka and catch 2 big ones, and then maybe come back through and catch a few more because you're out of time. But in the fall, it takes a little bit longer to trigger those bigger bites. It's not like roll up on a spot in the spring and you chunk a 10-inch worm out there and you catch 10 in a row and they're all 3 to 4.5 pounders. I think it's going to be more of a, okay, I got to weed through a couple of these 1.5 pound, 2 pounders to get where I'm at. Hope that one doesn't decease and you can get rid of that fish, because the water temps are good. We're running in the 80s, so I don't see a problem with any of that stuff. So
Good.
yeah, 100% agreed. This is a crapshoot. Not a lot of, there's a lot of history on this lake and a lot of video, but these Florida lakes change every single year, day in and day out, from hurricanes and wind and rain to drought to excessive rain. We see these lakes change every year and the fish position differently. So it's nice having a hometown advantage, but in the same fact, I like having it, but these guys are so good with their graphs and their electronics anymore that, the hometown advantage probably isn't exactly set up for me perfectly, because it's not springtime kind of where I can call my shot, so to speak.
We have kind of hinted at it this entire time, but we always ask weight prediction. So give us your weight prediction to make the top 10, make the final day, and weight prediction to win the event.
Well, I've done this once on an interview with, I think it was Dave, with B.A.S.S, and I don't want to take away from what I said in the first one. I'm still predicting that 16 pounds a day to make the top 10. I don't see that being too far off, and it might not look like that the first day, but I'm thinking that 30, 32, 33, the top 10. And I really think if someone could catch 18.5 to 19 a day is going to come out of here with that trophy.
Bobby, the last thing, and we'll let you go on this preview show for the Harris Chain of Lakes Bass Open. What's it been like jumping back into the Opens? Obviously, we know a few years ago a big migration happened. A lot of the pros went to the Bass Pro Tour, and we've seen some trickle back, and they had success there. They have success back on the Elite Series. You had the ultimate success winning $300,000 at the Red Crest event. For one, what does it mean for you to have a shot to be able to make the elites going into this last event? So not half the field, I'd say 80% of the field doesn't have a shot to make the elites. They're fishing for the classic. They're fishing for the top prize money. That's what they're fishing for. You have a classic bid still on the line if you win. You have elite qualification right there. You're a pro's pro. You've won almost everything in the sport. And now you're in a different stage of your career where you're trying to get back to a place you have been. So what's this whole year been like for Bobby Lane, especially with the exposure that you probably maybe thought would happen, but you didn't maybe expect it to be this level?
Yeah, I'm telling, the exposure's actually been pretty good. You guys have done a wonderful job covering me this year, with columns and blogs and interviews and stuff like that. I've really I've enjoyed the coverage, and I've had a lot of great comments on social media about that also. But yeah, it's a time and a place for everything. We, as a professional fisherman, I have set my goals in life, and two of my goals always was to win the Bassmaster Classic first, and also to win the Red Crest. I mean, that was everybody's, to win the two majors, and I was fortunate enough to have that fish on the third and final way to go 2 pounds to give me the title there at the Red Crest. And I am hungrier more than ever. Ronnie, we're not having this conversation, I'm not kidding you. I make a pitch at the very end of the day at Ozarks on my first day. I have 4 fish, and it is 4:45, and I have 5 miles to go through that treacherous gauntlet, the Miracle Mile, I'm going to call it, at the Ozarks. And I am literally got my power pole move on about 15, which is fast. And I'm trying to get to this no wake zone so I can crank it. I already know I'm coming in with 4 that weigh 9 pounds, because I know exactly what went down. I'm in 32 foot of water, and I literally just pitch a Berkeley jig to the end of a dock. A 4-pounder grabs it. Some way, somehow, I set the hook. Should have broke my line 30 times before that from all the stuff I was flipping in. It lands in the bottom of the boat. I throw it in the live well, put my rod, strap my rod holder down, made it back to takeoff with 2 minutes to go. I, it's unbelievable. God has given me some wonderful, wonderful wins. He's given me some amazing experiences like that one that I went through that I can actually talk about, and I'm glad to share it with you guys on this podcast. But we're not having this conversation if that fish doesn't come in the boat. We're having the conversation, Bobby, what are you going to do next year? You know what I mean? Or what's your plans? But it's weird. Things have kind of gone my way and not gone my way. It's a whole different scenario for me this year. The weigh-ins, I don't mind at all. I'm used to that. But the flight numbers, the amount of boats, the co-anglers, which have all been wonderful. Someday you get a co-angler, someday you don't. But I still have the dreams that I've had when I was a kid, and that's to win the Bassmaster Classic. And my plan is and will always be to get to the Bassmaster Classic. And I will be at that Bassmaster Classic fishing it someday, somehow. And my foot's on the throttle more than it has been for my entire career. I will be back on the Elite Series, and we can be talking about different things than all of this. But right now, I find myself in a different time, in a different place, and I like being a veteran professional doing this. You guys wouldn't think that I have the nerve or the nerve shaking or I don't sleep at night or this and that, but trust me, that's all false. It has been a roller coaster all year long, and to find myself even having a position to in the state of Florida to make it to the Elite Series and qualify for the Bassmaster Classic, I find is I've been truly blessed. I feel better than ever, and guys, I'm so excited to get this opportunity. I can't wait to see how things shape out, and if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. I hold that motto true, and all I can do is my time and preparation, and know that every knot is tied with 100%. Every Berkeley trilene or Durabraid that runs through my Abu Garcia rods is done perfectly. I got to wear glasses now to do that, but I got to make sure that they're focused in perfect to make sure that I have done everything in my power to prepare myself for this final event. And I've had a week off, and that's what I've done. So yes, it's been different, but it's been very enjoyable. It's kind of been relax free, and I've really, really enjoyed the first 8 opens this year, whether good or bad. I've left them learning something or meeting a new friend, and I got my Bobby Lane Cup coming up December 2nd down here at Camp Mac, and that's a big event for us and the kids, and I love leaving the year one way or the other, going into that event and just watching all those wonderful kids come out and smile and enjoy a day down here in Florida too. So a few things to tidy up next week before that, and like I said, preparation will be done, and I hope that God willing and a little bit of luck on the side, we are having a conversation after the opens, and it's a good one.
Kyle, I feel like December 2nd at the Bobby Lane Cup, like he said, all those kids will be coming up asking him about how he's going to catch him at Grand Lake to try to win the championship there as well. He's got all of his goals.
Win
that
the
would be great.
championship again, Ronnie.
Yes, yeah. Grand Lake has been special to you recently, and if you won, it seems like it's like Jacob Porosnik. He wins the Open, able to qualify for the Elites. He makes it at Hartwell, which is a place he's had success. Maybe we'll see Bobby Lane win in his home state on a lake he's familiar with to go to the Classic and then make the Elite Series. Bobby, appreciate you joining us. We're excited to see it all go down. Hopefully we get to see you break it down on Saturday for Bassmaster Live, the final bass fishing edition of Live of the Year. We'll have 3 more days of Redfish Cup action, but that's a little bit different than bass fishing. So we'll keep an eye on that. But Bobby, appreciate you joining us on the podcast today.
Guys, thanks for having me. Look forward, hopefully, I'd love to be on that live. I was on it at Watts Bar, and it gave me the chills every time that they said you're live. It's been a year, let's face it, and it's been a while, and it was nice having that camera back in my boat, and we really worked well together, and you guys do an amazing job. So thank you for this, and look forward to hopefully seeing you guys next Saturday.
For sure. Bobby Lane. He is the one who broke down the podcast today. We're excited to have him on the Bassmaster Opens. And Kyle, a cautiously optimistic Bobby Lane, it seemed right there. Didn't want to just get too there's a lot of things that can happen. He knows all the variables, but I feel like when he tries to classify that filing cabinet in his brain of what he's going to do at the Harris chain and what he's going to throw and what he needs to do, there may be some magic happen where he catches that 5-pounder to get to the weight mark he needs to each day or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where you don't want to like make assessments based on like recency bias or like hearing him like talk right there, but like what he's done over the course of his career on top of like hearing him discuss this tournament just makes me feel like there's no way the moment's going to be too big for him. And like at the end of the day, like, you know, there's so many things that are completely out of his control. What the guys ahead of him do, you know, completely out of his control. Can't control that. But I am at the utmost amount of confidence that he's gonna give it a really, really good shot, and has as good of a shot as anybody to jump up inside that top 9 and get it done. Because like I said, why would you not believe in Bobby Lane to get it done, based on one, just that conversation, and two, just based on who he is and what he's done over the course of his career. So that was really cool. He obviously did a fantastic job laying it out there for us, and I think was one of the better interviews we've had in quite some time.
Yeah, and I think that this time of the year is made for some of these seasoned pros. You know, obviously we've seen the young guys do very well, and that's a credit to them. Technology helps you level out the uncertainty of the fall. You know, if you know your technology well, on a day where you may catch 4 for 6, you can get 5 and you can maybe upgrade to 11 pounds, you know, just based off bonus fish you see on electronics. But otherwise, going into grinders like Watts Bar, we saw 4 former professional anglers in the form of Bobby Ish, Jason Lambert, and Greg Bohannon all catch them enough to make the top 10, all move up on that final day for the most part, and Greg having the best finish of all of them. And it's because it's a grinder. Oftentimes when I loved the grinders in college because there was a lot of anglers not excited to go there and struggle. And so that was a free opportunity to gain some points or to gain some spots. When guys don't have any fish at 11 a.m. on day 1, they're done. Like they're well, you know, we're just going to try to enjoy the day. Then we're just going to go drive around the boat at 50 miles an hour and eat a sandwich. They just lose focus. And I don't say that, you know, like the Opens happens a bunch, but the opportunity to gain points this fall have been there. Bobby has a top 10 and a 57th, but like he said, he wouldn't be talking to us without that one big one on day 1 to fill his limit. And he got out of Ozarks unscathed. I think he cut if I remember this right, he cut the deficit for qualifying for the elites. After St. Lawrence, he was 60 points back in 21st. He cut it to 30 and was 13th place. He has fallen back to 15th, but he's only 15 points back. So even a 57th in the fall, there were a couple people that bombed that opened the door for a 57th to gain you points instead of losing points. Now a top 20, and Bobby's going to be right there. Do you think that I mean, it's hard to predict a finish when there's 200 boats in a tournament, but I feel confident that a top 20 would get him at the door. He's either going to be in 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, or like first man out 11th. Like I feel like a 20th place finish is just what you need to do this week if you're on the outside barely looking in.
I think that's certainly where you set your goals. You asking me that question, I don't like that at all because you're the numbers guy, not me. I have literally no idea. I have a pretty good feeling that if he's inside the top 10, he's going to qualify. And I think that based on our conversation, I think that's where his mind is at, and that's certainly not as hard as the top 10 is to come by. In any, you know, B.A.S.S tournament, especially the Opens with so many guys figuring out a lot of the same things. I certainly think that's possible. And like you said, inside the top 20, you feel like you did your job. Like, you know, barring some like missed 10-pounder or something crazy, like you finished inside the top 10 and you're feeling, or top 20, excuse me. And you feel like you did your job. Like you gave yourself a chance. Obviously you can look back at the course of, you know, I hate to compare it to baseball, but with the baseball playoffs going on right now, you look back and like all the teams that come down to like one game at the end of the season, like the last game of the season determines whether or not they, you know, make the playoffs or win the division or this, that, and the other. Bass fishing is the same way. that day, your final day of tournament action seems like the one that's going to cost you, or maybe the last tournament. But the reality of it is there are so many days prior that, had you had a better performance on just one of those days, you'd be sitting inside the top 5 right now, or, however it may shake out. So I think if he finishes inside the top, top 20, top 30, I think he's given himself a good chance to be inside the cut line. And like we were saying, outside of that, I mean, if you're still outside of it because the guys in front of you just caught them, shake their hand and tell them good job because they earned it.
Yeah, half of the Major League Baseball teams are 0-1 after opening day, so that could have been the one game that you should have won to make the last game of the season a little bit better for you. Have your magic number solidified before the final game of the season. But Kyle, yeah, looking at it, I'm not going to say that somebody has an advantage over others, but let's just list the states represented. These guys travel the country and have performed great. Kyle Patrick, New York. Logan Parks, Alabama. Kyle Austin, South Carolina. Tyler Williams, Maine. Jamie Bruce, Canada. Wesley Gore, Alabama. Sam George, Alabama. Logan Johnson, Alabama. Joey Nania, Alabama. Bobby Lane, Florida. Jacob Bigelow, Wisconsin. Ben Milliken, Texas. Those are the guys that I would consider still have a shot to qualify for the Elite Series. And, there's a bunch of Southern anglers there. But like we said, Florida can throw anybody for a loop. I feel like 4 guys have done their job and they are safe in JT, John Garrett, Trey McKinney, and Robert G. But the rest of those spots are up for grabs. We don't want to have to necessarily pick against people, but it's not just I need to beat one guy. There's these weird points gaps. It's not like the Elite Series where it's a point here, a point there, a point here, a point there. There are some 10-point gaps. So if you think about it, Bobby Lane, let's just say he gets 20th. That means Jamie Bruce has to get 35th to still be ahead of Bobby Lane. You know what I'm saying? And so it kind of goes down from there. If somebody finishes 20th, they may have to finish 45th to tie. So the guys in definitely have it easier than the guys out, but it's a 10-point gap from Kyle Patrick to Logan Parks, 8 points to Kyle Austin, 15 points from Kyle Austin to Tyler Williams, and then 8 more points to Jamie Bruce. If I had to say somebody was in doubt, that 15-point gap from 8th to 9th in points, that's significant. That is an important 15 points. It may be one spot. Kyle Austin may not feel any safer, but 15 points there for Kyle Austin over Tyler Williams. That's definitely, a significant margin. Then below the cut, Wesley Gore is 1 point out. Sam George is 7 points out. Logan Johnson's 8 points out. Joey Nania, 12 points out. Bobby Lane, 14 points out. 13 points out. 15 points out. My math's a little scrambled. Then we get another little gap of 14 points from Bobby to Jacob Bigelow, and then 2 points to Ben Milliken. So there are a couple gaps. Tyler Williams, Jamie Bruce is where that first gap is. And then down at the bottom where Jacob Bigelow and Ben Milliken are, they're going to have to really catch them. It's top 10 or bust for them there. And I know that's why they're either going to be in Florida the week before the event, practice in other lakes to get ready. But either way, Harris Chain Lake should be a great one. It's one we've looked forward to all year. Kyle, like we said, great to talk with Bobby Lane today. The points race is coming down the wire. You can watch it all go down on Bassmaster Live. I said this earlier in the year. I guarantee you there will be someone fishing in the top 10 on the final day of the season that either clinched their spot in the elites or they're 8th and they have to finish 5th to make the elites. We're going to see someone with their life on the line, if we could put it that way, their fishing qualification life on the line that final day of the season. It'll be one to watch. I think my dad will be bumping around as a boat driver around there. He always is a Harris Chain local now, I guess you could say. So I'm excited to see it all go down from both perspectives. Maybe he'll give me some tips from the water of what he's seen. And you'll be able to, you're not going to it, right? You'll be able to watch some Bassmaster Live as well, like the last one.
I will be watching it on live, which I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to actually sit down and watch Bass Live some this fall. And the amount of storylines and the things that'll come down to the final seconds of that day. Obviously, those guys throughout the day are just going to continue to feel that pressure mount. The guys that can overcome it and stay calm will be the ones that prevail and fish the Elite Series next year. And then some of the guys, just the unfortunate way it is, they'll falter under the pressure and have to try again next year. That's the the good and bad about this sport. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing this one on live, because I think there's going to be some big catches, fun ways to catch them, hopefully. And then, of course, the amount of storylines. I think it'll come down to the very final day.
Yeah, it'll be great. I think we might probably try to get Cole Sands to Skype in and chat with us a little bit on that final day, as he was the champion of that, him and Connor DeMar winning the college championship, and that he is the last man in the classic right now from the elite race. David Gaston severely needs someone that's a local or didn't fish all the events, or is already qualified to win this Harris Chain Open to get him in the classic. He is 1 point out and he's on the outside looking in. No way to help himself now. That's episode 150 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company. We will see you in the next one.